Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking about the creative process and about the messy middle being the actual lessons and valuable part of life, not necessarily the end result. And I've just been noticing a lot of videos centered around locking in, centered around hard goals. And if you've watched my previous video, you'll know that this year I've decided to set a theme and a word per season rather than having hard goals. And my theme for the first quarter of 2026 is exhale. And for me, exhale is all about pausing, slowing down, looking at what's worked, looking at what hasn't worked, and maybe looking at where I haven't been as kind or as nice to myself as I could be. Because let's be real, most of us have a very tough time being gentle and kind with ourselves, even though we would not speak that same way to a friend or family member. So just thinking on that topic, I decided to sit down and make a quick video. Jumping into it, I kind of got a lot of my inspiration from listening to the audiobook of Big Magic, and I actually managed to find a copy in one of my local charity shops, which I thought was a very synchronistic moment because I thought I was going to run out of time on the audiobook hold. So basically this book is talking all about creativity in terms of a process that you show up with, and it's not necessarily about the end result, although a lot of the time when we set a goal or we want to achieve something, we're simply thinking about that end goal. But it's kind of about the journey along the way and enjoying that journey and making peace with the fact that you will have to show up little by little, day by day. And I think we're in the era where we are so used to seeing these overnight success stories and people saying that, they'd no experience in something or they took a chance and it went amazing for them. And we hear these stories, and then ourselves, we might show up to try something new, be it a new hobby or be it, a new sport or whatever, and we try it and we think, oh God, this is actually quite hard. And I just feel like sometimes it's easy to forget that this is normal, and a lot of the experience and the knowledge that you gain at the end part of the journey is what is received when you are in that messy middle. And I think for me right now, I feel like I'm in a messy middle because I am loving making these videos on YouTube and connecting with people in terms of personal curriculums and creativity and books, and it's really amazing. But it's also quite daunting in the fact that I don't really know what I'm doing, but I am doing my best to show up anyways. And it can be hard sometimes not to set these unrealistic expectations on yourself. And in terms of my own personal life as well, there will be a lot of change happening this year, big change, and it's exciting. But sometimes, and I've heard other people say this, people wish we could just like snap our fingers and go from point A to point B, but it is that in between that is that sacred time where we learn the most and we learn about ourselves. But I think it's also a time to learn about grace and understanding and patience and enjoying the little things. If you're like me, I was a 90s kid and there was no internet in my house. I'm an only child as well, so I really had to do a lot of play with my imagination. I did have friends, just to caveat that, but I really loved reading and I loved making things up, and even myself and my friends used to make up a lot of our own games, or we'd write newspapers and we'd write plays and stuff like that. And of course, childhood, you have so much time to do these things, but I was really reflecting on the joy that whole process brought me, because we were creating these things just for ourselves, just because we wanted to. And I do think sometimes, especially as grown-ups, we can get very fixated on what that end result is. Or I know there was a massive surge of monetization in terms of hobbies, in terms of, oh well, if you're not monetizing it, what's the point? you're actually going to strengthen your own ability to creatively problem solve, not only in your own personal life, but in terms of work or in terms of your family. And I feel like I've really noticed this recently in terms of people who can think outside the box and people who may see a problem, but they come with a solution rather than just being like, oh, hey, here's the problem, I don't know what to do. Putting time into something that isn't sort of seen as a grown-up pursuit can be seen as a time waste, but I don't think it is, and I feel like we're seeing a massive resurgence of people going back to analogue. I feel like that's such a buzzword at the moment. The Irish Times here in Ireland did an article about analogue life, and I will link it and I'll put a little insert in just in case you're interested. But I feel like when the main newspaper from your country is writing about something, you know that it's a trend, but it's also quite mainstream, and that there is an appetite. You know, people just are sick of the perfect Instagram feed or people selling dreams that if you take this supplement you're going to look like this, or if you sign up for this course you're going to be a published author in a year. And I think people just want a little bit more of reality and just to see something a little bit more truthful being reflected back to them. And that brings me back to something that I was saying in a previous video in terms of done is better than perfect, and just taking the pressure off ourselves in terms of we have an urge to draw. Just draw. You don't need to be the next Picasso. You don't need to have an art gallery. You don't need to sell online. You don't even need to show anyone. It's just giving yourself that little piece of play and joy, and in doing that, you know, you're going to shift your own mood and your own energy. And I do think there's something to be said for such a small task that can bring such an energy shift. I think we're also quick to be like, I need to book a vacation, I need to book a holiday, I need to go on a shopping spree, or whatever it may be. But sometimes it's the smallest things in our day-to-day life that can make the biggest impact, and just carving out a little bit of joyful creative time for yourself. And that's something I've been trying to do, and I actually picked up this book from the art and hobby shop, and let me just say, I can't draw. Like, when I say I can't draw, but this just caught my eye and it was €6, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna try this out when I'm listening to an audio book in the evenings, just to stay off screens and just do it for fun. Like, there's no other purpose behind it other than doing it for fun. And I feel like that's just a kind of message that I wanted to put into a video, because I think that it's either you're good or you're bad at something, and I don't know if that's something from childhood or from school, or I don't know where this programming comes from, but I've heard a lot of people talking about, oh, I'm no good at that, or I wouldn't be good at this. First of all, you don't need to be good at something to enjoy doing it, and second of all, nobody gets good at something without showing up and practicing little by little. So it's kind of those 2 points of allowing yourself the grace of doing something just because it brings you joy, or just because you have an interest in it, and just following your curiosity path. And it doesn't matter if it's not what other people are doing, it doesn't matter if it's not what your friends or family are doing, and also just giving yourself the freedom to try these things. And I say it every video, but the library is an amazing resource, so you can get plenty of this stuff for free. Life is mostly showing up and being a grown up and going to work and paying bills. So if we can't gift ourselves that little bit of joy and that little bit of space and grace, and if we're just constantly waiting for our next vacation or waiting for a day off from work to do these things, like, that's not a life. Like, our life is literally in our day to day. So that's kind of where I was coming from. I think it's quite sad when we see people, and I've been guilty of this as well, waiting for the perfect time to do something, and that perfect time never comes, and then you never participate in whatever it is you said you were going to do. For example, I have bought lovely paints, I've bought art supplies, or even a pair of shoes, and I've waited for the perfect time to use them because I couldn't possibly use them after work, or I couldn't possibly use them on a random Thursday. And years pass, and then you look back and you think, why didn't I just use it like I wanted to, and why did I put these excuses in place? Times we have that fear as grown-ups of stepping back into our beginner's mind, and when we're a kid, that's all we know. We're small, we're learning about the world, and we're used to being inexperienced, we're used to learning, and we have that brain. Whereas sometimes when we're grown ups, we can step into the I know that already, or I don't have time for that. And I think there is a lot to be said about stepping into the beginner's mind and stepping into the joy of being the novice and learning new things and being open minded. It's like a mini holiday, a mini vacation in terms of giving yourself a gift, like stepping into a new country as if you'd got off a plane in a new place you've never been. You are the tourist in your creativity, and the creativity is like a mini vacation away from your day-to-day life. And we all think vacations are worthwhile, so why would we not think that something like taking time for creativity, for play and for joy isn't worthwhile in our everyday life? And also getting excited about the small things, like for example, I just figured out from watching someone else's YouTube video that I could connect this camera to my iPad so I can actually see myself better instead of having to look into a tiny little view screen. And a lot of people would be like, okay, yeah, cool, but like, get excited about the small things, because let's be real, like, we don't want to be waiting for these specific dates on the calendar and then afterwards we're like, oh, back to life, back to the mundane routine. We aren't supposed to live life like that, and we don't need to live life like that either. So this is just a reminder, gentle reminder, to be kind to yourself and to take a little bit of time to step into your creativity and to really value the power of creativity, and to kind of take stock of where you currently are, and if there's an art project or whatever it may be that's gathering dust on your desk or in your closet, just to maybe have a little look and think, okay, does that still spark joy in me? And if it does, revisit it. I personally think that we can all live a more joyful and happy life when we gift ourselves that time to tap into our creativity and tap into the things that bring us joy, and just adding little touchstones of happiness into your day, be it a fresh coffee, a nice mug of tea, some journaling in the evening, a fresh stack of library books. These things don't have to cost money, but they definitely are worthwhile adding into your day. And yeah, like, I'd love to hear if this is something that you're already doing, or if this is something that you've noticed yourself, because I have been chatting to some friends about this, and I don't know if it's that we're, kind of in our 30s now and we're looking back and we're like, yeah, we want to carve out that time for joy and play, or if it's just a sort of start of the year feeling. But that is part of the way I'm going to be tapping into my seasonal goal and theme of exhale and creating that space. And I will be making more videos on these types of topics as well as on personal curriculums. So do let me know in the comments if you are gifting yourself some creativity and some space for play and joy. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.